Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Waterloo Region EV Association Electrifying News for, what is it, the 25th of May, 2023. The summer has started, and we're here to kick off some electrifying news to show you what's been happening lately. With me, as always, I've got Mr. Eric Stevens joining us from the Listowel area. How are you today, sir?
I am fantastic, Mark. That sun is absolutely intoxicating out there today. Beautiful day.
It is. Yeah, and it's only going to get better over the weekend, too. So looking forward to that. And someone who's already in the weekend, obviously, is Mr. Ian Graham, who's joining us from far up north. How are you today, sir?
Good. I'm working on my stubble, and as you can see, my hair is an absolute mess. Yeah, so you know what? I'm just going to start sharing because I can tell people exactly what we got going on here at our Electrifying News. I'm actually broadcasting tonight with Starlink, and I love how Starlink's Wi-Fi network is called Stinky. I'm not sure why that is, but you know what? It's working great, and I think this is a really cool thing that we've got going here. And I've started working because I'm up north and off the grid. I started writing my book called My Dishwasher Has Four Legs, Living the Off-Grid Life, with a foreword by Bandit the Bozo Dog.
Maybe tell everyone how far north you are. What are you close to up there, Ian? What city or town?
So I'm in between Espanola and Little Current, and basically on Charlton Lake. We're on four lakes. Charlton Lake is the main lake that I'm on. If you know the group of seven, Carmichael actually did a lot of painting up in this area. His cabin was like a lake over from me. But yeah, we've had a couple of the group of seven paint in this area, and the La Cloche mountain range is actually what goes through here. And it's actually considered to be the world's oldest mountain range. I think it's like 4 billion years old. It actually, at one point, it was higher than the Himalayas, which sounds like a great rock song. But anyways, it was rather large. And of course, the glaciers came through, chiseled the rock down. And then, of course, we got all the lakes up here and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's been an interesting. I've been at this cabin since the early 90s when my parents were here, and it's been upgraded quite a bit from originally running on micro hydro, which is the waterfalls out front. The waterfalls right now is crazy because there's so much water that all the lakes kind of connect each other, and they're letting the water out. And I've never seen more water than I have this season, to the point that it's actually damaged the docks a little bit. Yeah, so it's quite something. And being off grid, it's an interesting experience. But
yeah,
Starlink makes it.
Have you fired out the electric pontoon solar boat yet?
So because I came up 2 days ago, I stopped where it's stored because it's stored on a lot outside. And I wanted to check and see. I left the batteries in the container this season with some blankets around it, etc. It still was hooked up to the solar. The seasons before, I have taken them out and given them to a friend that works at the Espanola Hospital and stored them there. But I took my chance, and you know what? The batteries are fully charged. They're rocking and rolling. As for the boat, I was thinking tomorrow to take it out. Now I'm kind of questioning if I'm going to wait till the water level goes down, because there's so much water coming over the waterfalls and going by the dock. It creates quite a current. And I'm back and forth here between Kitchener and here, and I think I'd rather wait till the water goes down a bit, just to be on the safe side of things and being around. Yeah, but other than that, it's ready to go for the season.
And is this the first time that the cabin's been able to have broadband internet?
Yes. So yeah. So this basically Starlink I actually bought in Mexico. I know it seems odd, but it was cheaper in Mexico. And also with Roam, you can go month to month. And so, I hooked it up a couple days ago just to see what it's like. And so far, it's been amazing. I'm hoping that through this podcast that you don't suddenly lose me. But so far, and I have such an amazing clear view in this area. Like obstruction wise, there's nothing. I also encourage people if they get a chance, there's an app you can get that will show you when the Starlink satellites are passing by. Last August, I was outside enjoying a campfire, and all of a sudden, all these lights started going across the sky, like rather low, and it was incredible. And it was Starlink that was going by.
Yeah, the Starlink constellation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, with I believe that the end total is something like 26,000 is what they plan to have.
Eventually,
that alert is going to be going off every half second, I imagine.
Yep. So it's something else. But you know what? I will say one thing that's interesting with this as well is, I mean, yes, it's a little more expensive than your regular internet and everything, but for people with RVs and that, this is a real game changer. The ability to travel with this, and you can keep connected, especially too is so much of the world's doing online kind of a work. This becomes a nice bit of a business write-off if you want to do that.
Yeah.
But it's worked out so far pretty good, and it's unfortunate I can't watch my Leafs play anymore.
Well, you can, but that's YouTube.
That's YouTube. Yeah, exactly.
Gotta live in the past.
Yeah, I'll have to watch the last game of 1967. Yeah. Oh man.
All right. Well, let's get to the stories.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and gotta let that stubble grow out so you can get a nice sexy beard like mine.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to trim it up a little bit here and there. Otherwise, I really will start looking like the northerner. Yeah. So it's a good thing I haven't showered today yet either. So
man, I'm glad you're on video link with us then.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I'm glad Starlink doesn't transmit smell.
Exactly. All right. So our first story here. And actually, I'm going to add to this story because some news just came out today. Funny enough, and this is a mock-e. But Eric, I'll let you explain this part of it first, and I'll bring up the little last bit of news that just kind of came out today.
I think I already know what you're bringing up, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but basically, there's been a sort of a joint arrangement made to create another EV charging corridor that will run from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and then basically up the 401 corridor through the Highway 20 corridor through Quebec, and basically to link Kalamazoo to Windsor, London, Toronto, all the way up through Montreal and all the way to Quebec City. And basically they're going to be adding over 200 charging stations all along that, 215 charging stations to be exact. A lot of them are going to be between Quebec City and Toronto. And there'll be DC fast charging stations, and I think there's a few gaps already in there, especially going from Detroit to Kalamazoo. There's a bit of a couple gaps sometimes in the network, so more charging is always good.
Yeah, so that's interesting that Michigan and Ontario, Quebec got involved with this. What are they calling it? A binational highway of alternative charging. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about. Is it about every 50 miles there's going to be a charger? Is that the spacing?
Yeah, 50 miles is the supposed to be the maximum gap, and there's supposed to be no more than 6 kilometers off the highway.
Okay.
Great on. Yeah, this is it's just great to see this collaboration with Canada and U.S. and partnering together, and it's just going to ease the mind of so many people about charging and the charging infrastructure anxiety, if you want to call it that, and especially too because this is such a major stretch of highway. I think that's really important to note as well. So in regards to this, it's interesting that today also, and because I saw the Ford Mach-E, but there's already an announcement of Tesla opening up to Ford their superchargers. So it's interesting. There's a Mach-E here that we've got charging at this corridor, but also now Ford's also going to be able to, in the future, use some of the Tesla superchargers as well. I think more and more we're going to start seeing there's just collaboration overall with all manufacturers that, we're all working together to make it so that people have a place to charge and not worry about any of this stuff. It's going to be interesting too, as well. As mentioned, there is no mention of the infrastructure for electric or hydrogen trucks. But I kind of look at that as like, to me, that's going to be a whole separate thing. Because I don't know if you really want to mix necessarily the trucks with passenger cars and those people trying to travel. I kind of, I wonder if they are going to try and keep that a little bit more separate, especially because of the amount of charge needed for those trucks. Yeah.
SAE does have a separate charging standard for trucks, basically. It's a different type of charge connector, but it's also a much higher power charge connector as well, too.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this, in general, it's great to see that we're getting this type of, corridor happening. All right. So moving along, speaking of EV corridors, a few months ago, I'm trying to think, it was probably our podcast of December. I had brought up this gentleman, Patrick, who basically, he lives outside of Quebec City, and he toured down to Puerto Vallarta with his Ioniq 5. He actually inspired another gentleman from the Quebec City area to take his Model Y to Puerto Vallarta. And while I was in Mexico in January, I had the nice pleasure of having dinner with both of them and chatting about all this. But anyways, I'm bringing up again, Patrick's getting quite the publicity on this trip. And so Maclean's magazine has done an article on him, and he's basically, this lays out what he did, and it mentions about boondocking, which is basically camping out of your car. He did say that he didn't do any of that in Mexico, but interesting enough, in Mexico, from Puerto Vallarta to the border is only roughly 2 days. But he just kind of mentioned, he feels a little safer in a hotel in Mexico, and I don't blame him for that point compared to boondocking there. But this is, and he was pretty honest about some of the issues that he did have, especially in Mexico, because the infrastructure is not quite the same there. And so you'd have to find dealerships that had chargers or hotels. So that being said, that's only improving overall on all of that stuff. And, I think for a lot of people, I laugh too. It's like he drove the EV almost 2,000 kilometers before this trip, just in Quebec. So this guy, like Patrick's, amazing for really showing that an EV can really go anywhere, and really takes away the whole range anxiety and all that stuff away for most part. And of course, the cost, $630 both ways. You can't beat that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly a big difference cost-wise over gasoline by far. Oh, as we know, we know that that basically an EV is saving is basically 1/5, 1/6 the cost of gasoline at today's current prices.
Yeah. So
it's a huge savings when it comes to driving around. The other thing to mention is that in his Quebec journeys, he's benefiting from the Quebec charging infrastructure. It's a lot more dense than it is here, even in Ontario. So it's the electric charging infrastructure in Quebec is top notch from what I've been told.
Yeah, we can clearly see, based on his driving, how much the charging infrastructure has matured even in the last few years, especially in Quebec, but in other areas as well too. I mean, yes, he had to be creative in Mexico in a few spots, but he was still able to make it work. So it's fantastic to see these kind of stories.
Yeah. And Mark, to your point about, electricity being cheaper than gas, Gas is actually becoming more expensive because from what I'm hearing is that I think after midnight tonight, it's going to be about $1.60 or more. So
yeah,
it went up again.
It went up to $1.61 here in KW this morning, dropped down to about $1.58, and I understand it's going to jump up a little bit tomorrow. So
yeah,
for those unfortunate enough and still have a gasoline car, they're saying wait till after the weekend, and it should trickle down a little bit. But I don't have to worry about that, so that's okay.
I was going to say gas prices. What are those again? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's funny. Every once in a while, I'll be driving, and all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh yeah, what is the price of gas now?" And you just kind of looking like, "Oh, it's $1.53." Poor suckers.
I wonder what it would be like to be able to stand in front of a busy gas station and be able to hold up a placard or some sort of Bristol board with a sign on it that says, "How would you rather pay 25 cents a liter for gasoline? Ask me how." And it's so many people are just completely unaware that a solution doesn't exist. Yes, the solution is not for absolutely everybody, but man, it could certainly make a huge dent in the number of people that are lining up to pay these exorbitant prices at gasoline stations.
Yeah. The vast majority of people today could certainly benefit from an electric vehicle, and and even the options that are coming out now today, there's more and more vehicles and more diversity coming out today that cover a lot of different usage cases. So
yeah. I mean, price-wise, I always hear that sort of argument, and of course, here we see Hyundai Ioniq 5 long range for $52,000, and I always get somebody who'll say, "Well, I can get blah 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 for $25,000." I'm like, "Well, the technology's not the same. It's not the same car. You're not comparing apples to apples." But anyways, it's what it is.
I was going to mention Listable Ford here has got 4 F-150 Lightnings on the lot, if anybody's looking for an electric pickup truck right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And of course, now if Tesla opens up the supercharger, hey, you got that much more places that you can go and charge up. That's really cool.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Moving along here. Talking about money. And we're not talking billions. This is an interesting article. It's not billions we're talking about. It's trillions. And I mean, this is just Ontario, which is mind-blowing because they're not talking, like usually when you talk in the billions in the past, we're talking about a country. Now we're getting in trillions in a province. So this is quite something.
Yeah, so this is the different deals that have been happening lately with, of course, the Biden administration's IRA reduction for tax credit people can get when purchasing cars. And since, of course, Canada is involved as a free trade partner, all of our industry, as well as our minerals and products, are under this deal. So we've got a lot of multinational companies looking to set up shop just north of the border because, of course, the free trade deal and the automotive trade deal that we have in the United States allows these cars to travel in duty-free and participate in the credits that are being offered in the United States, which, of course, is 10 times our population. So there's a lot more people buying vehicles there than here. But the ability to be able to place it inside of a country that has a free trade deal with the United States gives the manufacturer the benefits of both worlds. So they get cheaper land, they've got access to actually Ontario, which of course is a automotive powerhouse here in Canada, where we've got the people, we've got the trades, we've got the knowledge to build these cars and these packs that are going on. Now, what's happened recently is we've got a couple of large manufacturers that have moved in. Stellantis has signed up for a new battery plant in Windsor. And of course, most recently, we had VW indicate that they're going to build a plant in St. Thomas. So what's happened recently is that it seems that Stellantis is a little bit upset about the deal that VW got recently, which seemed to be out of whack for what they signed up for. And now they're kind of pushing on both the provincial and the federal governments here in Canada and saying, hey, how do you sign this huge deal with VW and our deal is so much smaller? So and on top of it, Stellantis has already started to build that facility in Windsor. Some of the iron is in the air, and a number of the plants externals are taking shape already. In fact, Stellantis has put a pause on building at this point until they get some response from the governments. And of course, we've got Doug Ford indicating that, hey, we'll give them as much as we can, but the coffers are pretty empty. We're going to have to rely on the federal government. And of course, the federal government is saying Ontario should be chipping in a little bit more here to make this deal happen. So we've got this point fingers back and forth. And of course, Stellantis really can't afford to pull out of the deal that much either. That obviously they could if they had to, but they've already built some of the infrastructure, and they've already counted that it's going to be part of their production plans for a certain timetable that's going to roll into their supplier requirements. So all parties here want to make a deal. Hopefully, cooler heads will appear, and they'll be able to come to some sort of a deal, because certainly Ontario workers would love that both of these plants open on time and start producing EVs. But as Ian mentioned, with just these two deals, we're not talking billions anymore. We're into the $1 trillion mark for how it's going to affect the economy of Ontario and in Canada as a whole. But this is some interesting news we're living through, and you've probably seen it in the news. The federal and the provincial governments pointing fingers. Hopefully we can all get together here and make everyone happy enough to continue with this building spree.
Yeah. And, one thing I do like, especially about this article talking about, Ontario and Canada for EVs is, we have the big potential here to fully develop a circular economy all within Ontario and Quebec. Basically, we are able to mine the minerals, we're able to process them and make them into the finished cell products. We're able to take those cell products, assemble them in the batteries. We're able to take those batteries and put them in the cars. And then afterwards, we're even able to recycle them and break them down, recycle them, and renew the process again. And we have the expertise, we have the minerals, we have everything to be able to do that here in Ontario and in Quebec. And that's just a huge potential, and I could see why that's a massive attraction for a lot of businesses like Stellantis and Volkswagen, and Ford as well too. Even though they're not building the cells here, but they are assembling battery packs and building EVs here too, or at least they will be in Oakville. So, just a huge potential.
Yeah, I guess my main comment on this is like, can't we all just get along?
Yeah.
It's we're again back to the $1 trillion aspect of everything, and once the machine starts turning its cogs and its wheels and everything else, it's like this is a huge aspect of everything. And of course, I was also reading, with the union aspect, they're kind of like, come on, let's get this going. Like, this is a big thing for Ontario. And I think that the stalemate aspect of this is a little frustrating for sure for many parties. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even see this being the end of it. I see this just as the beginning. So as Eric has said, once you've got this circular economy running just within Ontario and Quebec, there's just going to be more and more companies that are becoming late to the game and saying, yeah, we went on it. Ontario's got it all now. Quebec's got it all now. Let's just set up shop there and be over with it.
Yeah. We're going to have that expertise here. And if you want to go someplace else, it's going to cost you that much more, or it's going to be that much more of a headache to do it. So we're just going to be the place to make it easy.
Yeah.
On top of that, one of the things I find interesting about this whole Stellantis thing too is, Stellantis, obviously, when they went into there and they started building this battery plant, they had a business case. So they had a business case, they had it agreed upon, they knew what funding they were getting. And now all of a sudden they've seen the Volkswagen deal and they're like, well, now we want more. And it's like,
yeah,
that's not how the world works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully a little bit can be shaved off here and there, and to make them happy enough to continue in good faith. I agree. Stellantis should just deal with the deal that they've already signed up for. Obviously, as Eric has mentioned, they had a business case. It made sense for them at that time. Nothing has changed between now and then, except somebody else got a little bit of a better deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, for down the road with the future, who's to say that some of those things won't change with the deal aspect, for the better, what Volkswagen got and Stellantis didn't. Somewhere down the road, it might be Stellantis got this, Volkswagen didn't get that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the thing is, Stellantis has an assembly plant in Windsor as well, too. Volkswagen is not talking about building cars in Canada. They're talking about just building batteries here. But Stellantis builds cars in Canada, too. And there's other ways that the government can return additional funding to Stellantis in other ways to encourage them to build EVs here as well. So to retool those factories for electric vehicles. So there's other ways around this.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Very cool. So from trillions to billions, but we know what we're talking about, a lot of electric buses.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So this is a giant group deal, basically, between 10 different transit authorities in Quebec, and they've all gotten together and they've purchased a very precise number of 1,229 Nova electric buses.
Yep.
I guess they couldn't round that up to 1,230, but 1,229, very precise. But for $2.1 billion deal, and this is fantastic, because looking at the transit authorities and looking at the feedback that I've heard from other transit authorities about their electric buses, they seem very excited about them. Most of the buses that they're getting generally outperform what they originally were told they were going to do. In many cases, they're under-promising and over-delivering, and many of the original claims seem to be quite conservative. So the transit authorities are getting these buses and they love them. And so now seeing this big deal, it just makes sense, because a clean bus, clean mass transportation, I don't know, just it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I find I'm really excited to see, because we're hearing so many municipalities go on about cycling, walking, taking alternative transit. And the big thing about the bus aspect for me that I really like, the fact that they're going this way, is diesel is one of the really, emission-wise and for healthcare costs, is one of the worst things that we have going for us. And even up here in Espanola, there's a spot where there's a whole bunch of school buses, and I can see there's a garage where they bring them in and work on them and everything else. I'm looking, those buses as well. I wish that more of that would be changed over from diesel to electric. But I think for municipalities, this is great to see this, and then also, like you say, over delivering, under promise, over deliver. And I think other municipalities are going to see this, and they're going to be talking amongst each other. And it's like, oh, well, you've kind of been the guinea pigs with all this stuff, and it's working that well for you, and you've saved how much, and and maintenance and everything on this stuff. I think it's just awesome. The one thing I'm always kind of found curious, I'm sure these buses go to a depot, they charge up, etc. But with the power of so much of the solar panels now, I'm surprised that we don't see more of those on top of the bus. Not necessarily even charging the buses for the drive aspect, but even just for the other, say, like an AC heat pump, all those type of things. I'm surprised that we don't see more of that put onto the bus. And if there's a reasoning for, I mean, it's another expense, I get it, but I'm just surprised that we're not seeing that part of it as well. But in general, this is really cool to see. And you're not talking hundreds or even tens. The fact that this is over 1,000 now, this is great to see.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the extra solar on top of the buses, Ian, I think it's a question of getting everything else dialed in first. It's a question of, let's make sure that all of our promises are met, and that we get some real world testing with over 1,000 buses in Quebec, and then they'll make adjustments from there. I can definitely see that solar will come to these buses in the future. It just makes sense that they've got all that real estate up there and it's not being used for anything else. Why not let it run the HVAC system or something like that? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I've been following within the solar industry. I'm not sure if either of you have heard of perovskite, I think is how you say it. It's kind of like the new alternative to silicon, and it's cheaper, it's more abundant, it's more powerful, etc. And they're making some great strides in that too. So, but yeah, just for the bus itself, like the real estate that's on it, that it could potentially be used that way would be very cool to see. All right. Speaking of buses.
Yes, indeed.
From 1,200 to 2.
So not quite 1,200, but Ontario Metrolinx Go buses have rolled out 2 all-electric buses that they're going to start to put on basically city-to-city routes for their trial or testing of these buses. And they're the familiar double-decker buses that you see running around the highways and byways of the province currently. And these buses are going to get a range of about 300 kilometers in the summer, about 225 in the winter. So they obviously you're going to be doing routes like Mississauga to North York, Milton to North York, Oshawa to Yorkdale, Oshawa to Finch routes. So it's going to be a shorter runs, probably under 100 kilometers, a little bit more to start with, just so the Metrolinx can get familiar with how the buses operate, how they charge, what kind of ranges that they're getting compared to what the pamphlet said. They're obviously going to be checking and double checking their figures. These buses come in at about 1.5 million apiece. Again, this is a test for Metrolinx. They're looking, of course, that if the economics line up and the savings are what was stated previously, they'll probably be adding to this. But this is our first trial test, and I look forward to seeing these buses on the road. Hopefully they'll maybe roll in Toronto to U of W or something, and we'd be able to see the buses roll into our regions. But that's it's good to see. It's a good first step, and like others, you've got to get your feet wet first. You can't necessarily jump in with a purchase of 1,300 buses. In some cases, you've got to start somewhere. And this is Metrolinx getting their feet wet and testing what is available in the market and if it will align with their business case.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing some of these buses on the road actually, and coming down the road and taking a look at it. And yeah, charged in the winter with around 300 kilometers range. I think you're right, Mark. This is probably going to be roughly 200 kilometers round trip or 100 kilometers one way type journeys they're going to be targeting, which is a huge capture base of Metrolinx. That's pretty much the entire Greater Toronto Hamilton area that they can cover with these buses. So it's still a very large market that they can hit with these buses in the interim and collect a lot of data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm hoping too, the data they collect from these buses is one thing, but I hope they reach out to other areas of people, that have done these buses and get some more details from them as well. I was just in Scotland beginning of May for 10 days, and I rode double-decker electric buses in the city there, all over in Glasgow. And that was really cool. It was a really neat experience to ride on those things. Now, they're not doing 650 kilometers, mind you, and their winters are not quite actually the same as what we have, which surprised me. But at the same time, I'm sure they can learn from a lot of this as well. And hopefully that'll go from 2 to 100 plus. We'll see what happens.
And for those interested, the buses take somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to fully recharge, and that would be 0 to 100%. And they will be being charged at the Mississauga and North York bus depots, which is on both sides of basically Toronto. Gives them the ability to put them on different routes.
Right. So if there's two electric buses right now, one's on the road, comes back, charges while the other one goes and runs and then comes back and charges, maybe.
It could be an offset like that, or most likely, maybe they would run them both, and then during peak hours, maybe they run in the morning, they come back and charge for 3 hours, and then they run in the evening for the evening rush as well. That could be done too. So they could be doing a couple of routes per day, but they didn't identify that in the article.
Yeah. So cool. All right. So speaking of Scotland, this is I brought this article up because, funny enough, after I came back from Scotland, I came across this, and it basically, most of us have never heard of Munro vehicles, and I put down it's sold out its first 2 years of production, and it's doubled its electric lineup. And you may think, oh, okay, well, what's the numbers? Well, it's not a heck of a lot. It's like 200. That they're doing. But this is also a company that is brand new. It just started. And, anybody who knows any automotive history with starting up any automotive company is very difficult. And when you look at the past history, how many have failed with this type of thing. But anyways, I hope for these guys, they do really well. The interesting thing about this, and part of the reason I also brought it up, is that it's more of an off-road electric vehicle. And it's more, those who want to really get out. And of course, when I was in Scotland, the one thing that I was told when I was in Edinburgh is the Scotland landscape constantly changes, and they weren't kidding, because when I went from Inverness to Isle of Skye, every half hour, 45 minutes, the landscape changed dramatically. And I'm talking some pretty huge mountains and everything this way. So a vehicle like this for off-roading would actually be very cool in those type of areas as well. And the other thing too, it's just, it's just someone else that's doing an electric vehicle. It's not just Tesla or GM or Ford or there's actually companies that are kind of like catering to kind of a unique audience. And I have, friends who I'd like to see an electrified Jeep, and, been waiting on that type of thing as well. And this is kind of a close version to an electrified Jeep in many respects. So I wish these guys well, and it's pretty interesting to see that we've got another possibility.
Yeah, it's an interesting vehicle. The price point there, too, at 50,000 British pounds, is actually kind of impressive for a vehicle like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And one thing I've always seen too is in the UK, for some reason, there's just a large number of companies that are tinkering with different types of EVs. There's a lot of little shops there that are doing conversions or battery upgrades or building vehicles like this. I've always been amazed at how many engineer tinkers there are in the UK and how many different shops they have there for their market. So it's always coming up with some really creative ideas, and that creativity will help spill over and improve the industry overall. So.
Mm-hmm.
When I had seen this vehicle, the first thing that came to mind was, of course, the Bollinger. It reminded me of very much like that kind of boxy look. But that's the great thing about EVs. Since they require less parts and you can purchase a lot of the parts through a supplier network, you've got a lot of companies that have the ability to make their dreams a reality. And see if they can compete in the EV market. And just like the early days of the gasoline car, there was a lot of bike shops that would produce vehicles because they had access to the parts that were being used. And a lot of those bike groups were either purchased out or became larger fish in the pond. So hopefully we can see a few more entries that can come up with some unique and interesting ideas that work for regional buyers.
Yep, exactly. So, it's funny, as much as we see classic cars and custom cars with the gas engines and everything else, I think there's it's only growing the custom EV aspect of things. I think about it's got to be a good probably 5-6 years ago of the guy who took a Datsun, a 1970s Datsun, and put a electric motor in it, and then would show up at the racetrack and just, you know, blow everyone away, all these muscle cars with this little Datsun that was electrified. And of course, that led to another gentleman who converted a Mustang. I think it was a 1970 something fastback. And I think it's called Black Widow or Black Spider, and it's an electrified Mustang. And, you know, so it's, you know, it's simpler, that's for sure, to do some of this stuff. And with the conversions, and yeah, I think we get some interesting stuff for sure. I get a kick out of the yellow. I actually have to say I do like that. You know, if you ever got lost, you'd be pretty easy to be found. Good. All right. So, energy storage, which is, man, this is growing leaps and bounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So the IESO just last week basically announced that they've signed a number of contracts, in fact, 7 different contracts for different battery storage facilities that range anywhere from 5 megawatts to 300 megawatts. So a total of 739 megawatts. And this is to complement already the 200 and roughly mid 200s number of megawatts that are already in Ontario for grid-tied storage. And, you know, this is massive because, you know, 739 megawatts, that's the equivalent of a single nuclear reactor at Darlington. So this is it. Wow. This is a lot of capacity that's being added for grid-tied storage. And this, you know, has the potential to offset a lot of, you know, natural gas production that we're using today. Because today we're using natural gas for demand response, basically. And adding this level of capacity of battery storage capacity is huge. It has the potential to really help smooth out our grid connections and make our grid that much more efficient and responsive. So,
now, one point about this, they're offering contracts from 5 megawatts to 300 megawatts. The 300 megawatts would be probably closer to like a major city, such as Kitchener, such as Toronto. Is that kind of probably the idea for something like that?
Yeah, the one project they call it here is the 250 megawatt Oneida one that we reported on in the past. That's down towards where Nanticoke used to be, the old coal-fired power station. So that's, you know, and yeah, those types of stations would probably be put in where there's already quite a bit of grid capacity. The other thing I found interesting in the story is that 5 of the 7 projects have at least 50% economic interest from indigenous communities as well too. So there's a good indigenous tie-in with this as well.
Yeah, I think that's important actually. Yeah.
What's also great about this, as Eric has mentioned, is that this reduces the need for peaker plants on the system. So natural gas, even though it's better than oil and better than coal when it comes to emissions, eliminating some of those natural gas peaker plants, which are the most inefficient there is on the grid, outside of oil and outside of coal, which of course we've vastly eliminated here on our Ontario grid. But having these systems will allow the grid to switch on and switch off or transfer electricity almost instantaneously. And that smooths out our grid, makes it easier to manage. And on top of it, allows us even to collect a little bit more renewable, because with a peaker plant, you have to run it at a certain RPM, and it generates so much electricity that, of course, has to be used in the grid in a usable manner, so that the grid continues to be even. But with these, if there's a slight amount that can be added or taken away, these battery plants, what are they called? Virtual power plants, basically. They'll be able to turn on and off in a fraction of a second and deliver or receive those charges. And it makes everything run a little bit smoother. And on top of that, whoever owns these particular battery packs, they get the profit from it as well, because they can sell it to the grid when it's required and buy it back cheaper at night to store in it to sell it again the next day or whenever they need to sell it. So it's a great system. It's good to see that with what we have already, this is getting close to 1,000 megawatts that we will have available to us here in Ontario.
1 gigawatt.
Yeah. It's interesting, Mark, like you mentioned about, the gas peaker plant aspect. They have to basically put out all this energy, whether it's used or not.
Yep.
And to tie that in, just because of being off grid, of course, many places are off grid, has a gas generator. And that gas generator could be, let's say, 2,000 or even 5,000 watts. And we need to we need some lights. So we're running 2,000 to 5,000 watts on a gas generator to power even, say, back in the day, 100-watt incandescent lights, and we got 5 of them. So that's a perfect example of kind of like where this is showing that much more efficiency by hey, what is it you actually need? Okay, we'll give that amount to you, and we're not having to produce all this excess, which isn't going to get used.
Yeah, exactly, because that excess does have to be used. There are instances in the current power grid where when a peaker plant comes online, they will have to shut down some wind turbines because they're collecting too much in certain areas. And because they know the peaker plant has to deliver all the electricity it creates, some of the renewable resources we have, like wind generation, sometimes has to be slowed or shut down in order to keep the grid balanced. Being able to use those batteries would eliminate that requirement.
Yeah, or we're selling it at a loss to our neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it just becomes that much more efficient overall with all that stuff. All right. Oh, back to some minerals and back to Ford again, actually. Ford's been really a lot in the news lately. So,
yeah, so this, of course, again, part of this influx of business that's been happening in Ontario and Quebec because of the IRA in the United States, mainly driving this. But this Quebec company, Nemaska Lithium, has announced a deal with Ford where Ford will be purchasing 13,000 tons of lithium hydroxide per year for 11 years on this deal. And this company is going to be based about 150 kilometers northeast of Montreal in a community called Bécancour. Probably butchered that, but I'm not from Quebec, so Bécancour is what we're going with. Also, they're just this plant that's being built there to start production in 2025 is basically going to be able to refine lithium ore that comes into it. And the other bonus is they're getting the lithium ore locally from a little bit further north in the James Bay area of Quebec. So they'll be mining it there and be able to deliver it to this new production facility that will refine what they get and then ship it off to Ford. Now, it didn't say in the article as to where this would be ultimately used because, of course, Ford has a number of partners that it has to build its batteries. But, of course, this is in 2025, so there could be other things afoot here as to how this is going to be used. But certainly, being so close to Montreal, it's near the transportation hub of the main highway that runs through Canada directly into Michigan, and certainly could be used in a number of different northern U.S. states that connect with our highways quite readily. So again, another company that's benefiting from this recent influx of business that's come into Ontario and Quebec as part of the EV revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, again, fantastic. Going back to even going back to the circular economy and stuff like that, this is a part of the steps of that is, again, keeping everything here largely in Canada for the most part. Though I think, these tons of 13,000 tons of lithium ore will probably end up, I'm guessing, at their Blue Oval Battery Park in Michigan, or their Blue Oval Battery Park. I think that's where it's going to end up, probably, because that's the facility that Ford is sort of building on their own. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I like the fact too that of course with Quebec there's a lot of the energy hydroelectricity there, and that they're going to be having access to operate a lot of the plant with the hydroelectricity. And it's interesting they say we use 12 times less water. I'd be curious to know how they use that much less water. That's quite a bit actually, because of course that's one of the criticisms of lithium is the water aspect, especially in South America. We kind of hear that there's a bit of an issue with farmers and communities having dealing with lithium mining companies because of the water that there's being used that way. But overall, and Eric, again, it's like comes back to this circular economy, which I've said for a number of years of the positive loop. When you're dealing with oil and gas with transportation, it's really is a negative loop. You've got to feed that beast all the time, and it's great to see with this type of stuff. I'm hoping that more and more people realize that this is a positive loop on many levels, including I think for jobs. And just for keeping the economy just kind of going. It's great that way.
Yeah. To sort of elaborate on your question there, Ian, in South America, I know the common methodology for extracting lithium is often pumping water into the ground and pulling these lithium salts out. And then they run them in these evaporation ponds where they evaporate off the water to get it at the lithium salts. In Quebec, I think here we have a more direct mining approach to accessing the lithium ore.
Yeah. So yeah, and that makes a lot of sense on that aspect of it as well. I was looking at the picture with all the snow there, wondering if that was the lithium salts that they're having to refine that way.
It'd be nice.
That's just Quebec frozen water.
Yeah. It's frozen water.
It would be funny if lithium salts just fall out of the sky there.
Either that, or they use the snow to collect the lithium salts, and then when spring comes and the snow melts, they got it.
Yeah. They're using it to salt the roads in the winter, and then after the winter, they can just collect it at the sides of the roads.
They got little sweepers that go up and collect it.
Oh man, nice. All right, last story of our night, and I thought we ended off with a little drab of Scotch. Anyways, as I mentioned, like I just came back from a 10-day trip in Scotland, and it was interesting to see. I didn't see as many electric vehicles as I thought I would. Definitely saw electric vehicles. I saw an interesting aspect of their charging in downtown Glasgow, where you have to supply the cable, and then on the streets, you plug into this pole that has the electricity through your cable to your car, and once you're done, you just go along, and there's no cable there. It's basically you supply your own, and I thought that was kind of really cool. And of course, it's all the electric buses in that respect. And one other thing too, not just for electrification of cars, but Scotland is now at 96% renewable energy, and they're doing this with, of course, a lot of solar. Wind and solar. I saw a lot of that on the houses, and of course they have a lot with tidal wave generation, which obviously has gotten that much better, because I know that one of the biggest issues with, of course, when you're dealing with the tidal production is the power of the waves. It can, as happened in the Bay of Fundy, where a $2 million test project got swept away because the waves were so powerful. But anyways, what's happening here is, of course, Scotland's known for Scotch, and Chivas Brothers, they're basically doing a 2-year pilot project, and they're taking a electric semi truck and to export and take out their Scotch. And again, it's a test project that they're working on, and they're going to be doing capable of hauling 24,000 tons of whiskey per journey, and will cover between 250 and 300 miles per day. and a total of 62,000 miles per annum. And as it says, push the truck to its full capabilities and see how it can benefit them in the future with cost reductions of fuel, mechanical, I'm sure all those aspects of things, and deliver our Scotch in a much more environmentally friendly way. And now remember, we're only supposed to have 2 Scotches a week according to the new alcohol aspect of consumption. I'm not sure that's going to ever work for any Scotsman.
So what you're saying is that truck should help fuel a town for quite some time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But
That's
anyways,
interesting that they're again, you said that you didn't find as many electric vehicles in Scotland as you were anticipating. Do they have a unique green plate in Scotland, or can you tell an EV a different way there?
No, the plates looked all the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was nothing that way that made one different from the other on that. So I'm, to be honest, now I think about it, it was surprising that I didn't see more electric vehicles, especially too with the fact that the renewable aspect is so huge. But I didn't totally get into all the politics, but I did hear from some of the people in Scotland that the price of electricity has also gone up quite a bit more in certain aspects as well. Yeah. And again, I didn't really dab into too much of that part of it. So.
I really like the idea of the charge posts. You have to have your own cord. I think that would be a huge win for North America for vandalism and such, yes. That people just travel with their own cord in their trunk. And whenever you get to a charger, you just use yours. It locks into both sides. And when you're done, you take your cord with you. I think that would be a great win here in North America as well.
Yeah, the type 2 Meineke is what they use in Europe. And that cord is actually pretty nice because it's 3-phase capable, so they can run up to 400 volts AC, 22 kilowatt, and wow. Those little portable cords are very common all across Europe. So it's I agree, it's a great strategy, and that's something we see here in North America. Is one of the common problems is a lot of the level 2 charging stations that we see here, or even some of the DC fast chargers, they get damaged because of the cord sets. People come by and they're trying to steal the copper, or they'll come in and stick a piece of chewing gum in the end of the charge port or something like that. So, this helps alleviate those problems. So,
yeah, it's interesting talking about damage. Of course, the corner of Manitou and Fairway by the TD Bank there. Those Sun Country chargers had cables that were definitely all cut up. Mm-hmm. And so that was a problem. But about 2 weeks ago, went to IKEA, and funny enough, the charge points, the little clip, when you plug in and it snaps in, those were broken on at least 2, if not 3 of them. Wow. And so we're trying to find a charger that way. And again, it comes back to it's just pure vandalism. So a cable would make a lot more sense, for something like this. And again, it would standardize so much of this industry as well. If we just here's the cable, what length would you like, and you're done, and then that way too, you're more responsible for the cable, and the vandalism goes way down.
Yeah. I think that would be a big win.
Mm-hmm. It's what happens when too much Scotch gets into people.
Very good, very good. Well, Ian, your little experiment with Starlink worked pretty well. There were a few glitches here and there, but overall, I would say that you probably were at 95% of good streaming. So that's good to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up on the video. Press that subscribe button in the YouTube algorithm, and you'll be notified next time we add a new video to the Waterloo Region Electric Vehicle Association YouTube page. And it really helps us out. We would appreciate that. With that said, Ian, what do you got shout outs for the end of the show?
Well, I'm gonna maybe so much a shout out as I'm gonna make a prediction that I'm gonna say Panthers in 5, maybe 6 games over Vegas. I think tonight. I think Vegas is gonna have another stellar game, and we're gonna see a Panthers Golden Knights series, which it's interesting. Like, what happened to the original 6?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially too with Florida, blowing out Boston, especially like Boston needing one more game, and Boston cream. I'm sorry, I had to laugh at that. But anyways, no, I think it's going to be an interesting hockey series, and I'm going to be disappointed to see hockey kind of done for another season, because it's been quite enjoyable watching it.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's been an exciting NHL playoffs for sure. Eric, go ahead, Ian.
Sorry, I will give one shout out. One thing, I got to give a shout out again to Scotland, just because it was 10 days I was there. The renewable aspect of things, I did see a lot of people doing stuff with solar and that. I got to give the Scots people a lot of, you know what, they're very positive people. They have a beautiful country, and if you're looking for tourism, the last place I stayed at before I came home was an Airbnb, and the guests there said that New Zealand's considered to be the top destination for tourism, and yet they had a couple from New Zealand in Scotland say, like, this is the closest to New Zealand that we've ever seen. So if you are looking for a trip, and you're into the whole renewables even and everything else, but I highly recommend, gotta give us a shout out to Scotland. You got to check it out. I'm actually thinking next year for the 10-year Rush Fest Scotland anniversary to go back and stay longer and look around even more.
Very good. Very good. And did you get a shot of Nessie?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you saw my Facebook post, yeah,
I did. It seemed like a purple pen Nessie that was just kind of bent over like a J shape.
Yeah, a friend said to me, he's like, I always thought Nessie was kind of like a dark gray black, and I said, well, it was a warmer time of year. He changes colors with the seasons.
Yeah, he's a fan of Barney the Purple Dinosaur as well. So there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Eric, any shout outs for this evening?
No major ones. Just I've already moved on to baseball, and unfortunately, the Jays got off to a good start, but the last couple of weeks they have not been doing so good. Yeah. So
hopefully we can switch that around with the Rogers Center new interior. Hopefully they'll switch around a little bit and get some better baseball going.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we want to thank you for watching the show. Again, give us a thumbs up if you can. Press that subscribe button if you haven't already. And we'll get together next month and talk some electrifying news. So everyone, have yourselves a good evening or afternoon or morning whenever you're watching this. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.